Welcome to the Grimfrost Podcast. Today's guest is Rowdy Geirsson, author, humorist, and Viking enthusiast. So, welcome to our longhouse. Great to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me. It's quite an honor. Yeah,
it's great. So we're going to jump right into it, and because you're a humorist, kind of, right?
Yeah.
And you writing about Vikings and Scandinavia, but you actually do have a passion for an interest for the subject. Is that correct? Like that?
Yeah, and it's correct. Yeah. So I write these things that are supposed to be funny, and almost always they have to do with Vikings or something related to Vikings, like the Vendel period or something like that. And some articles that have appeared online that don't, but usually that's how to do ordinary.
But you're from the United States. You're from did you grow up in Boston or?
No. So
you're from the East Coast.
Yeah, and at this point now, I grew up actually divided between Colorado and New Mexico.
Oh, okay.
But moved to New England late teenage years, New Hampshire, which is kind of like almost a satellite of Boston, basically. But I lived in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and live in Maine.
So you've been all over the place, basically.
Yeah, in those two regions, kind of,
Yeah, that's cool. I love Colorado. I like New Mexico as well. So,
oh, yeah?
And Boston is always nice to go to as well. So yeah, it's pretty cool. But how did you become interested in Vikings per se? Because obviously, I mean, it's not anything they teach you in the school in the United States, is it?
No. I mean, I think you're lucky if they cover Leif Erikson, and sometimes they do. I know my school did, maybe in the 5th grade, something like that. But I just became interested in it at an early age. I think that happens to a lot of people, books and things like that. I know as a family vacation, we once went to Disney World, and there was some sort of exhibit or something about Vikings at the time that made an impression. And I continued to find that fascinating, along with medieval things in general. I liked Robin Hood a lot as well. And as I got older, it just kind of stayed. And then I took a course in college one semester, and it was an archaeology course, which I didn't stick with or anything, but I did have to read a book about Vikings. It was my own choosing, and it kind of blew my mind, blew open, like, oh, there's a lot more to this than just I read in Eaters of the Dead by Michael Crichton as a teenager or whatever, and it just goes deeper and deeper.
Yeah. What book was that? That you read?
Vikings North Atlantic Sagas, released by the Smithsonian Institute's publication. Okay. It's a big hardback book. Neil Price had some early articles in it, and it's very much about the Vinland explorations, and sort of was meant to be a commemorative thing. I think around the year 2000 is when it was released.
Because I think it was around. Well, actually, no. That was a decade later that they had the big Viking exhibition in New York as well. That was on loan from Stockholm. Did you go to that?
Which year was that?
I forget now. It was in 2010 or 2011 or something.
No, I missed that.
Oh yeah. But, I actually went to that because we were on tour in in the United States at that time. It was kind of interesting to see all the Americans going, "Wow, look at that helmet!"
There was a exhibit that went through like the Mystic Seaport in Connecticut that had like Valsierra helmet and things that. So,
that's probably the same one because that was on tour in the States.
Yeah, it was moving around, like Vikings Begin or something like that. And I think Uppsala University had some part in it. But, I did go to it. But not in,
different place.
Connecticut was a little closer.
Yeah. So what was the exhibition at Disney World that you went? Was it just like an entertainment thing, or was it an actual like artifact exhibition?
Not an artifact exhibition. I don't really remember it very well. I think it was just like a ride you went on.
Oh, okay.
And it was like, okay, here's old Norway. Now we're going to ancient Greece, and one of these kind of things. Like, oh, but like the Viking guys are wow, when you're like 4 years old
Yeah,
or 6 years old or
I
whatever
thought
it
you were a
was.
bit older. I'm sorry about that.
No, if it was artifacts, I don't think there would have, I would have just kind of kept on walking probably at that age.
Yeah. But as you said, you studied archaeology, and then you actually studied here in Sweden for a while as well, right?
Yeah. I had a little study abroad in college, but mainly the main thing is I came back in a postgraduate program through the American Scandinavian Foundation, and I was in Norrköping most of 2015, learning about the redevelopment of the industrial landscape there. So really, it was a kind of not
Viking age.
yeah, I wasn't learning about the Viking age industrial development as.
But I think I read somewhere online that you were talking about that wall, the Östgötavirke or something.
Oh, yeah.
Is that an actual thing? Because I must admit I never heard of that. Actually.
Oh yeah, it's actually I actually was there last year. So I mean, it's close to Norrköping, and like the bus isn't too long of a bus ride, and you have to walk a little ways. But yeah, it's a kind of forgotten, much smaller sort of thing, kind of like Danavirke in Denmark, which I think, if I'm remembering right, the people who found this one in Östergötland basically named it that because the Danavirke had this prestige.
Okay.
And so they're like, oh, this is something similar, and it's like really not
it's
that
only like the tenth of the length or something.
Or something like that. Yeah, it's not as significant, and it's like, it's on a farm, and you kind of don't even know that it's necessarily it approaching it because it's just on the side of the road on a farm, and there isn't this like visitor center or something. I've not been to the one in Denmark, but I assume they maybe have something like that.
Well, I think it's in northern Germany now.
Oh, yeah. The border shifted, right?
Yeah, it did, yeah. So the defense work didn't really work that well.
Well, and not at a certain point in time anyway.
No, of course. So what's so fascinating about Vikings? What do you find so fascinating about Vikings?
I think, cop-out answer would be like everything, but I think it just is a sort of, to Americans anyway, like it's this romanticized landscape. There's like fjords, and it's cold, and midnight sun, and winter darkness, and all that sort of thing kind of goes along with it. And then there's this spirit of adventure and kind of making your own path and not necessarily doing what you're told or whatever. So I think there's some sort of like, that maybe we project onto that, but it's nonetheless part of a lot of how these things are presented. And so I think that probably draws people in, and then maybe you learn more about it at that point.
Yeah, because I mean, Vikings actually had a pretty strong hierarchy anyways.
Yeah.
So they kind of did what they were told. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been so successful in warfare, especially, I would assume. But so when you came to study here in Sweden, was like, did Vikings have anything to do with that choice, or was it just that student exchange program?
I mean, that was a motivation for interest in Sweden, as well as other Nordic countries, but Sweden emerged at the forefront for me. So that was always sort of like a parallel interest. The actual program of study, or it was like a self-guided research project, didn't really overlap with it, but I was aware that this was place where Vikings are from, and so that added a lot to it for me.
So was that something you kind of delved deeper into when you were here in Sweden as well?
Some. I was pretty preoccupied with the research project I was on the hook to do.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But a little bit, and then since then as well, and I've revisited a few times, and each time it's kind of like, oh, there's more that I've learned that I want to learn more about now, and then it kind of just goes deeper and deeper, like that.
It's a pretty big rabbit hole.
yeah. You don't necessarily realize that when you're first getting interested in thinking, oh, this was a cool movie or a book or something like that, and I like the imagery that goes along with it, and then you go down this rabbit hole
Yeah.
if you maintain the interest, you know.
Yeah, which is easy to do. I know first hand experience. So then, what about Sweden and Scandinavia attracts you? Then, like, is there any specifics that you would?
Yeah, I was always interested in this part of the world. I was aware of it at an early age. I had a dollahest at the age of like 5 or 6, something like that. As my grandparents did
really?
church tour all over the Nordic countries.
So you don't have any Swedish or like Scandinavian heritage or something, or
not within like living memory,
Okay.
you know. But they had done this tour. It was a very Lutheran part of the Midwest they came from.
Yeah.
And so it sort of fit, I suppose. But, you know, so it had an early awareness. But then as I get older, like, you know, my interests are things like, okay, Vikings and, you know, so where are those from? I also was always a big ice hockey fan. And so what countries are good at ice hockey? And, you know, living in Colorado when the Avalanche won their first Stanley Cup with a certain player from Sweden,
of course,
you know, that stood out. And
not my favorite player, by the way, but
no.
he's great. But yeah,
but it was a great team or year that they had. And
they were fantastic. I remember.
Yeah. And then the other thing that was big was music. And so there's, you know, a lot of bands from Sweden that I like. There's, you know, one you've probably heard of. They call them On the Marth. But there's others, and they just all come from Sweden. And I like a lot from Finland also, but they don't have Vikings. So.
No, they don't. Well, they kind of do, but they had their own kind of mythology that is kind of similar. Yeah.
Kalevala stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So that all kind of overlapped and made me interested in Sweden. I saw pictures of Stockholm at some point, and I was like, oh, there's a city on islands. That's unique. So
yeah, it's pretty different.
So that all folded into one thing. Yeah.
You're here in Sweden right now, and you told us that you're here for a full month, like working and like vacationing at the same time. So how often do you come back to Sweden or Scandinavia?
Oh, it's been a few times since 2015 was when I was living in Norrköping. So I think maybe this is the third time now. I haven't, you know, I think there's like a short visit, or maybe fourth. There are a couple of short visits, and then last summer I had a little bit of a longer visit, and then this year as well. And so, yeah.
Is there anything specific that you like to explore when you're in Sweden or Scandinavia?
Yeah, I like to go to see the sites I haven't seen that have to do with, you know, Viking Age, Vendel period, that sort of thing. And so, you know, last year we were just talking about Göteborg. Yeah. And so that was, you know, one of the things I made a point one day to hop on the bus and go look at this, you know. That's awesome. so that kind of thing is like what I try to do, you know, mainly on like the weekends when I'm here for a little bit longer. Yeah.
And right now you're staying in Kalmar, and I know like across the bridge to Öland, the big island, there's this, I think it is a Viking Age like model village there.
Ecketorp?
Yeah, Ecketorp.
Okay.
That's wrong. Yeah. Have you been there yet, or is that one of the goals for you?
That's a goal. Yeah. I haven't gone to Öland yet, so I'm on the early stage of my visit here.
Yeah,
so
it's a beautiful place. So I think when you go there, like in like spring, it's going to be amazing. Like when May really hits, like the warmth comes,
the leaves come out.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah. No, I look forward to that a lot.
So. You said you visit historical sites. What sites have you visited here in Sweden? Is there a specific sites that you enjoyed like more than anything else?
I would say Vendel was kind of leaps to the front of my mind, just because, well, it's famous in this world of subject matter because it gave its name to that time period right before the Vikings, you know, but we kind of were the ones saying what it is.
Yeah.
And so you hear a lot about it, and you know that there's these graves there and there's these artifacts that have been found and everything. And so going and seeing it in person was sort of a, you know, major kind of highlight to me. And my dad and I were here together at the that time, and so, you know, we went, and it's off by itself. You have to take a bus and then get off the bus in the side of a road in the middle of nowhere, and then get on another bus, unless you're driving yourself, which
Yeah.
we weren't. But and you get there, and it's just a very unassuming place. There's this obelisk that says, this is where that was, and there's a church on top of it now. But it's still it's like a high point in the surrounding landscape. It's relatively flat, but they were clearly going for the high point, and it's just so that I thought that was just a fascinating place to walk around. There's other burial mounds right around it also.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I haven't been there since my 20s, actually. I had a friend who lived there, actually, back then. But so we were there visiting. But I remember it was a pretty cool place. As you say, very unassuming, but still pretty cool.
Yeah. You wouldn't realize it had this major role in how we talk about history, but driving by it on the road or something.
Yeah, but it's kind of impressive that something like that. I mean, obviously for those people it was just life, but for us it's something magical.
Yeah.
So you come to Scandinavia and Sweden a lot, obviously, and you said you studied here. So what would you say are the differences between Sweden and the United States?
Well, transportation comes across as one that
you said taking the bus like you did to Vendel is that's pretty common here in Sweden. You can do that even to the countryside, but in the United States, not so much, right?
Yeah, we have it to more limited degree, and I would never want to trust the system to actually pick you up on the side of the road when, coordinated with the one bus is dropping you off. And that worked out well here, at least on that day. So, that sort of thing. The cities are, I think, fairly sensibly laid out. I've ridden bicycles around, and, there's kind of dedicated bike lanes sort of between the city centers and then getting to the periphery, and then at which point maybe you're on a country road, and so you're just on a country road. But, that seems to be pretty commonplace here. And people's attitudes are a little different. They're not as chatty.
No. We
so,
like to keep quiet.
Yeah. So, but,
I kind of like the city layouts in the United States, though, because a lot of them have that grid pattern that makes it so easy to get around, like just either walk around or even when you drive. Which I feel, at least here in Sweden, like especially if you go to Gothenburg, it's a nightmare. But at least for me, but I don't know. Like Boston is not like that. It's kind of crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. It's not a grid at all.
Yeah.
And the joke is, and it might have been true, I'm not actually sure at this point, but that the roads were just kind of determined by which way the cows walked. That's what they say anyway.
All right, that's kind of off topic a little bit. But we already mentioned you're an author as well, and we like to talk to you a little bit about your work. And you wrote this fun little book that I actually haven't read, but Norse mythology for Bostonians. Like, first of all, I mean, we're not going to linger too much on this book, but if you're from Boston, you might really enjoy this, or America. I think for Swedes it might actually be lost because it's actually written in Boston dialect. Is that true?
That's correct. It's many intentional misspellings in that book to try and capture the Boston sound. So, it's just fun. We've all probably heard it in certain movies, but you don't read something like that. And if you're not accustomed to it or willing to train yourself, it's not going to be the smoothest read.
So why would Bostonians, or why are Bostonians especially suited for Norse mythology?
And to some degree, because it's maybe that they aren't more so than anywhere else. Like it's the sort of, I think a lot of the humor is coming from the fact that you're combining two things that don't really expect to go together. And there's different sides to Boston. There's this side, which is the kind of hostile drunk guy at a bar, and that's a very prevailing sort of image of people from Boston. There's also
it is a bit of the image, yes.
Yeah, and but there's also like the incredibly highly educated, side of Boston as well. The more universities there, I think, than any other city in the country, and that kind of thing. But that wouldn't suit the joke as good to have. This is a professor from a university in Massachusetts talking about Vikings. It kind of goes with it, but you have somebody like Mark Wahlberg character going off on
from Ted.
They're sitting there, and instead of talking about they don't want to go to work, or the girl that Mark Wahlberg's chasing in that movie or whatever, they're talking about Odin and Thor.
Yeah. So, but then that became the impudent Edda.
Yes.
Which we have here, and I told you before that I noticed right away. It's a Boston Bruins logo behind Odin here. So obviously there's a Boston connection to it.
Yeah.
So did you just kind of rewrite this with like normal English, or?
Yes. Yeah. It's basically the right explanation for it. I mean, it's expanded also, so there's some chapters in that one that aren't in the first one, but it corrects all of the intentional misspellings and makes it easier to read, and it explains references that aren't explained in the first one. If you are from Boston or you live there, or you're familiar with it, there are certain references that you will understand, but if you're from somewhere else, you might not.
You might miss the... Yeah.
So that's addressed, and it has a forward in it too by Eric Storson's friend of mine. So he contributed a little bit to really get you in the mental mindset when you actually start reading the myths. So And,
so how did it come about? Like what? Why? How did it come about?
Why indeed? It just occurred to me one day. It was a long time ago, like 15 years now, and there's these odd and factually incorrect monuments around Boston having to do with Vinland explorations, Leif Erikson, and they're kind of quirky and fun. They're wrong because they're just wishful thinking from the 1800s, but I had gone to look at one day that is on the side of a road and completely neglected, and it says this is where he built his house in the year 1000 in Vineland or something like that, and it's empty beer cans on it, all that kind of thing.
Of course.
And it's like it's been there for 140 years or something like that, and no one cares, sort of a thing. But I was like, oh, this is interesting, I'm going to go look at it, and at some point it started going through my mind, like somebody like one of these characters we've been talking about carrying on about this stuff, and so I thought that was funny, and so I wrote a little thing and I sent it to an American humor website called McSweeney's, and the guy who runs it is actually from the Boston area, so he appreciated the local angle, I guess. And it kind of went from there. I started writing more regularly, and it had to do with there are historical articles that were doing with the history, and then some that were dealing with the mythology, and then eventually at some point I kind of took some of what was on the website, compiled it, redid it as needed, and made it into the book. So that was 10 years later.
So what's can you tell us about the concept of the book then? But like,
there's a concept to it that does not exist on the online versions, which is that it's the third Edda, the third great post-Viking age recording of Norse myths from some biased source. And that it was recorded mistakenly on somebody's phone or something like that one late night while the Boston Bruins were busy losing the Stanley Cup, and it was dropped in an alleyway on the way home, and somebody found it, and it's been analyzed.
Is that the alleyway behind the dive bar?
Yes.
Yes. I like that.
Yes.
It's very suitable in a way. Yeah. I think that's hilarious, actually. But but what were the biggest challenges then to transform the old I mean, it's an old Viking tradition, or like a Scandinavian or Viking Age tradition, actually, to humanize the gods in itself. I mean, if you read the Edda, you know that that's what they did.
Yeah.
So basically, you're carrying on that tradition here. But what was the biggest challenges of transferring that to the modern age, would you say?
I think I'd actually say that was probably the part that I had the easiest time with, and that the harder part was keeping track of like where I'm like making things up, and also wanting to provide information to readers that this is, this is coming from whichever poem in the Poetic Edda or from Snorri's Edda or one of the other sources, and kind of keeping that all on track, because I didn't want it to. I wanted it to kind of maintain that level of. I'm thinking of the right word, but like a consistency where if you read this, you can follow along with what is being invented with what isn't, and so that part I found to be more challenging, I think, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess so. But I mean, what was the idea about getting Thor in that story to retrieve his driver's license, to get his driver's license?
Some of these things I wrote long enough ago now, because it did start out on website and then the one book and the second book. So I don't necessarily exactly remember what prompted me to think about that specifically, but I know it had something to do with the fact that I thought it would be funny to have Thor go through this really frustrating process that everybody has to do every once so often. You have to go get your driver's license again at some point, and it's never pleasant. It's always very slow and frustrating. And so what would some, God who's known to have serious temper be like in this situation? And
yeah, because like in the Edda, he's kind of like a genuine hothead.
Yeah.
Like big, strong, probably a little bit fat, and like with a terrible temper and probably a drinking problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I guess, also suits the Bostonian, because obviously that's the what do you call it? The preconceptions that you have of Bostonians. Yeah. So that in that way, I guess Thor is a Bostonian.
Yeah, it kind of, he fits the image in a certain way better than maybe some of the others.
Yeah. So the original story of Thor in a Viking dress is obviously, I mean, if you read it, it's obviously satire for the age.
Yeah.
So, and the people of the Viking Age must have laughed just as hard at that, right?
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah. So, do you think there were more vulgar versions of the old stories back then?
I would imagine so. I mean, that would be my guess anyway, because they certainly didn't shy away from this material, from what we've got of it still remaining, which was even after when, they were really telling it. And it's, they don't really shy away from some of these things that maybe we would assume them to now, or at least I think popular conception is that Thor doesn't put on the wedding dress because he's the manliest man of all time and he has his hammer and he's going to go smash the giants, and we kind of, in all the popular culture versions, tend to forget the other side where it's kind of making fun of him in the wedding dress. And it happens with other things too. And, Odin flies through the air as a bird and he's under extreme duress and some mead flies out his backside. That's not really the same presentation that we see usually in the popular culture things of him being this very austere wanderer and seeking knowledge and all of that. Like, but he also has the side where he can't keep his meat inside himself while he's flying.
So do you think those stories were a bit more vulgar when they were actually an oral tradition? Because I mean, they were written down in the 12th century.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I imagine they had very variations of them. Maybe it is up to the poet, perhaps, who.
Or the one who's telling it at the time.
Yeah,
Probably,
yeah. Maybe you're really excited by like when one poet is performing for the day because he does the version that you like the best, and somebody else does another one, and emphasizing different things.
I was just curious now, because we already talked a little bit about Thor, but Odin and Loki are like two like prominent figures in the mythology. And I was curious to see what your like kind of modern take on them are as well. I mean, if Thor is the Bostonian guy, the image of the Bostonian guy, what would Odin and Loki be then?
Oh, they're not quite as the hot-headed thing. I mean, I think that I actually present them fairly close to how they are in the Eddas, except I'd say Odin is more of a scoundrel, perhaps. Like he's not always up to good, and that's true in the old stories, but he's doing things like, he really needs to leave Freya alone with his cell phone. Like he's doing, inappropriate things, but I think that kind of fits with what we know about him. And so he's sort of this, he's wise and he's warmongering, but he's also kind of deviant and strolling around downtown Boston, getting drunk in public and sleeping on the stairs and stuff like that. and Loki is, really just more of a straight up jerk.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he's,
which is kind of what he was in the books as well, I guess. But yeah, I think it's kind of fascinating to look at the way you created these characters into modern day people, and you can sort of understand that this is what it must have been for the people of the Viking Age as well, to make them relatable. Because for me, that's one of the things I always enjoyed most about Norse mythology, is that I find these gods very relatable as they are. But so is that also one of the reasons why you wanted to do this, to bring them out to a broader like audience?
I think it was sort of maybe a sort of a subconscious thing, but then I became aware of it, because I think, you're right. They are very relatable and very kind of human in their behaviorisms, and that is overlooked a lot. I think, like with what I was saying before, you don't think of them as being quite so human in a lot of the popular culture things. In the old sources, they are much more so. And so maybe it does bridge that gap a little bit, but as I was working on it, and, I mostly was just doing what I thought was funny at the time, like what was in my mind, but then it becomes like, oh yeah, but this is kind of, kind of maybe the character kind of takes on their own, life in the pages or whatever, and they kind of come across that way, and like, oh yeah, you could see how somebody would do this. This is like their, there's a lot of things that, couldn't happen. There's like monsters and all this other stuff, but, like kind of their reactions and everything, it's like, okay, there's people like that out there.
Yeah. Well, going back now to what we touched upon a little bit before was the Leif Erikson monument.
Yes.
Because I read something that you have a project that you call like promoting Leif Erikson and failing. Is that correct?
Yeah. The promoting Leif Erikson awareness. And failing. Yeah. So
why is it failing?
I thought it was funny to say that at the time, and I haven't changed it.
Oh, okay.
It's something I came up with when I joined social media relatively late. And it was just, people have their little taglines and stuff. And so I've been interested in that part of the history. And then there's the phony Boston monuments I was talking about. So it just kind of was something that, I often interested in him and thinking about that part of the history and the places nearby in Boston. And so it's like, people don't know about this. There's a lot of people that don't even... Not necessarily the Boston monument thing, but just Leif Erikson in general. I know I've had friends who don't really share this interest, and I've mentioned him to them, and they're kind of like, who? So that I think maybe kind of prompted where some of that idea came
Yeah.
from. But it's really just kind of just sort of a joke of a tagline. And then, yes, every once in a while on social media, I do put out a picture of one of the monuments, or maybe the statue that's in front of the big church in Reykjavik, for example, or something like that, and say, "Oh, here's Leif Erikson awareness being promoted. This is an example of it being promoted.
Okay.
Hope you're becoming more aware."
Yeah, I see.
But
So, actually, we should probably mention who was Leif Erikson was. Can you explain that to us shortly? Because obviously, not everybody watching this is going to know. But
yeah, true. Yeah, no. So the guy who was credited for sailing to North America from Greenland, and so he set up the settlement, or his crew in Newfoundland is the one site that they have that has been found and validated, and there's all this speculation as to, well, how far did they go beyond that? And there were multiple voyages. I mean, he just is maybe the first and got the credit for the most part, but no one really knows how far they got. And if I remember right, they think the Newfoundland location is really more of just sort of a stop en route, and where did they really go? And so that just leads into like all sorts of speculation in the United States and Canada, I think, as well, to some degree.
Yeah, I know that there's some speculations they made as far as Mexico. So
yeah.
You hear all these kind of things.
Well,
it's good to hammer out who Leif Erikson was for those who don't know. Yeah. You should know, but you never know.
Yeah.
Anyways, so why do you think then that Leif Erikson became this thing in Boston in the 1800s? Why did?
So,
is there an answer to that?
Yeah, there is, and I'm going to rely on something that I found a long time ago, which was somebody else's theory, and I don't remember this person's name, but there was an article on the website of the Needham Historical Society, and that's a town in Massachusetts, close to Boston. And the historian for the Historical Society wrote this piece about these monuments and, well, why did these arise in Boston in 1880s and 90s thereabouts? And the theory with that article, which I found to be fairly convincing, was that there was a period of big Catholic immigration to New England, so Ireland and Italy for the most part, and the old Bostonian was very English, Scottish, Protestant, and so that it was actually maybe a little bit of a backlash, or like, we're going to raise up this part of the world that was not the Catholic newcomers, and they latched on to this Scandinavian Leif Erikson thing, even they were basically English, of English descent, more than Scandinavian, but that kind of prompted some of it. And I think others, there's one guy, Eben Norton Horsford, who was responsible for a lot of the monuments being built, and he was a Harvard chemist and did something like invent baking powder or something like that. So he had this fortune, but he got he was like one of these amateur, in those days, sort of archaeologist type of people. And I think he just got fascinated by it. And he was like, well, I'll go look at these things, these old things that people have found. Cause they did find certain things at some of these sites, but they misdiagnosed them basically. And he was like, oh, this is cool. Like, it was Leif Erikson's house. I'm going to build a tower now. And I can do it because I invented whatever thing that was that he invented, something along those lines.
Baking powder.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a really weird slice of history, but they're still there. And that's kind of what I know about the maybe how they came about.
So do they know that this? What was his name? Is he the one responsible for all the monuments, or just the tower marking Leif Erikson's home?
I think he was the tower, and then there's there's a plaque also, but that's like a few miles away. But then there's also a statue of Leif Erikson himself, right in the Back Bay neighborhood, and I don't recall who was responsible for that, but I think that was more of maybe it's in the city of Boston. The others aren't, and it might have been I'm donated by somebody, but I don't know. I don't think it was him. I can't remember offhand.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But
yeah, it's interesting that English people would latch on to Scandinavians. Yeah, all right,
yeah,
all right.
yeah. I mean, that's the theory according to the local historical society.
Yeah. So if this now is failing, how can Grimfrost help promote Leif Erikson?
Let's have to talk about him all the time.
Well, I guess we're helping right
Yes,
now.
yeah.
Yeah. It is a fascinating story, though, with Leif Erikson. So you can imagine that, like, when you hear about this and you understand that he actually made it to North America in open ships, like 400 years before Columbus. You know, obviously it's going to be an interesting thing. Anyways, we're going to talk a little bit about another book of yours.
Okay, yeah, me too.
The Scandinavian Aggressor.
Okay, yes.
This is the one. And it's a book about it's another humoristic book, obviously, because that's your style.
Yeah.
About Scandinavia and the traces of Vikings in modern society. And now I forgot my glasses, but I'm going to attempt reading a little bit of it, anyways.
Okay.
And this time I'm sure I'm going to get it right.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Yeah. So this is the beginning of the book, basically setting the tone for the whole thing. So the modern Viking movement began with a bang in the early 21st century, when a crew of Norwegian whalers unexpectedly sacked the holy island of Lindisfarne off the coast of the Northumbria in England, looting a historic monastery's gift shop before accidentally almost razing it to the ground and returning to their ship. Thanks to this single unanticipated act, the whalers unwittingly kicked off a remarkable Neo-Norse renaissance. Obviously I'm cutting it a bit short there, but that's a good way to kick off a book. I don't know. Can you see traces of, like, the Viking Age people in modern Scandinavians?
Oh, I don't know that I would say I have for folks I've met so much, because I'm thinking of, like, these really, like, go out there and do these Viking sort of things. I mean, I think there's presence kind of all over. I mean, you go onto Fornsuk online and see if, is there something that I could go look at nearby? And it's like, I mean, the map just is like, turns into like a red splotch of things all over the place. But, the people I've met have all been, very friendly and perhaps very interested in this stuff, but aren't really striking me as that they're ready to go sail and start a fight.
Oh, yeah. But like, as a Scandinavian myself, or as a Swede, I can see, like, nuances of, like, how we are as Scandinavians and how it translates into, like, what you read in, like, the old Icelandic sagas. And obviously we're not violent and brutal like that anymore, but there are, like, especially, like, mindsets you can recognize. Would you say that kind of is one of the things? Yeah,
I'd say maybe is more subdued behavior.
Yeah,
is there, and the Lagom mentality, which was always claimed to come from passing the horn around equally among the members of the ship or hall or whatever. And so those things I think are more prevalent.
More prominent.
Yeah.
So in this book, you have a number of made up modern Vikings.
Right, yeah.
Are they based on, like, people you actually met, or?
No, they're all entirely figments of my imagination, except for actually there's one character who doesn't really talk, and that's based on the behaviors of some guy I used to play hockey with. And
Okay.
There's a chapter about a dragon slaying, and there's a character. There's two characters in that. One is doing all of the talking, the other is just kind of sitting there being disruptive. And he keeps saying the word doom over and over.
Oh.
And I did play hockey with a guy who would, he would be at the rink and he'd just, doom. So it's like, not him as a person, but that, like, whatever weird thing that he would do,
Yeah,
So,
I had a friend like that when I was in the army. He didn't say much, and he always looked super serious, like he was going to kill someone. So I can, I guess we all have a friend like that somewhere in the background. And then they have the metalhead that recites heavy metal lyrics. I was thinking that's got to be someone,
No, that one. No, it was just I just had fun inventing that character.
Yeah.
But,
I thought I recognized myself in that one.
Yeah. So
just kidding.
with it, no, it's like, this it was all you.
So what was the idea behind this book? What prompted you to write it?
That was the one I had the first idea for of them all. I don't know. It came to me maybe 20 years ago, and then I wrote an early version that was really bad and scrapped it, but lots of stops and starts. But I just thought it would be funny if this idea of people basically going to Viking again, using the word in that sense of like literally going to Viking, and from modern day Scandinavia. And the modern day Scandinavian countries are more like, Sweden for a long time had the identity of being a neutral country. And so it just it was another thing that struck me as this is sort of a little bit of a contrast, like this sort of weird behaviorisms of going out and doing this again, but in modern day Scandinavia, like it's where it's happened 1,000 years ago but also it doesn't necessarily mesh with the perception, at least in the United States, of the very peaceful welfare state. So and so the idea of kind of contrasting those two things, plus it gives me a chance to basically just dive into stuff that I'm interested in and be very nerdy about and everything. So that's motivation.
Because all this comes from, as we already said, like a genuine interest and love for the culture and the history and the mythology, right? Yeah. So I think that's pretty cool. So what has the reception been to the book?
Positive. I'd say what I've seen from Scandinavian aggressors has been generally positive. I don't think I've seen any negative feedback for it. For the other two, it seems to go to extremes. Like people either really, really like it or they're like, what is this?
Yeah.
So it's been generally, positive. So I've been happy with what I've heard or seen, people say or write about it.
That's good. I'm actually, I just browsed a little bit in the book, and I think it's really, I have some reading to do. For sure. I'm really looking forward to that. But you also do some more serious stuff, because you've written articles for instance, Medieval World, Culture and Conflict, and Scandinavian Review, Viking Age magazine. So would you ever consider writing an actual historical novel or something that's like more like seriously based in history and mythology?
Yes. You mean as a book rather than just an article? Yeah. I mean, I have two kind of ideas that I've not done anything with, but I would say yes, and I think it would kind of be coming from place of about place and landscape. Like, I mean, that's sort of the recurring interest for me, because that's like what my day job is involved with, and the landscape and places and designs of places. And so something that were to look at these sites as they still exist and how they mesh into the modern world. And that's, so when I've visited, I've gone to, Göteborg, like we talked about. I went also to Aska, where they found the Freya pendant in Western Östergötland last year as well. And these are places you read about. A lot of books touch upon them. Or Aska and the Freya pendant. Göteborg not so much, but Vendel another. But you have no concept of like, what is this place actually like today? What is there? How does it mesh with the modern world? So something like that, I think, would be interesting. That I've had the idea. I've not actually done anything with.
Is that sort of what you're doing with the Scandinavian Aggressors, the website or the blog site? Is that kind of the thing? Because I read a little bit about the stuff you have on there, and it kind of rings a bell to that.
Yeah, that's something I've started a little more recently. I've had that website since 2007, and I've let it languish at multiple occasions.
Yeah, okay.
But in the past year, 18 months, something like that, I've been updating it more frequently.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me, like, well, I think the most recent post is about Vendel. And, this is what this place looks like. Here's some photos of it. Here's some very basic information. I'm not going to tell you everything about it. You can go find that out elsewhere, but they're probably not going to have a picture of the obelisk or the exhibit in the one-room museum that they have there, and those sorts of things. So yeah, I'm kind of touching on that a little bit on my website now, and it's fun for me. And I hope people find it sort of interesting at any rate.
Oh yeah, I think it's super interesting. I think Vendel, as you said, is a very fascinating time in Scandinavian history, because it's very little that we know of it. But there are such rich and amazing artifacts that we've found from that time.
Yeah,
which is insane. So when you write these books, though, like, how much historical research goes into it?
Oh, quite a bit. I mean, the mythology books, that's more research into the mythology, but the Scandinavian Aggressors required some historical research and also just geography research. So yeah, I do as much as I need to achieve what it is that I'm working on, I guess. So I like to read anyway. I read a lot of times it's books having to do with this stuff. And then if I, like in that example, have a certain chapter and I need, I know what I want it to be, so I know where to go look and like find out about it. And if that doesn't have enough, then I can keep going further to find out more. But it's kind of selected to what I need to make the chapters and then final thing come together. So, yeah.
How much artistic freedom do you take with the actual mythology and history?
For the actual history, I don't take artistic freedom. I mean, if there's anything in there that comes, anything inaccurate, it was like an honest mistake. And I try to make sure that I don't have that happen. I mean, the mythology I play with, but I also try to note where I've played with it in the footnotes. And that is, I think, a little looser too. We were talking about myths and how they were not necessarily a static thing. At the history, we know what we know, which isn't everything. We only know what we know, but I'm certainly trying to present it accurately and not, I'm not making things up. I'm making up the events that I'm in the Scandinavian Aggressors talking about in the present day, but anything that references back to the Viking Age, I'm not making up.
Yeah. So when you do your research, then, do you have any favorite go-to sources for that?
I think they've probably changed over the years. I mean, at this point, I think that Children of Ash and Elm is high up there.
Yeah.
The Vikings North Atlantic saga I first mentioned is high up there. I have a number of history books. Those are like kind of go-tos, and then like you can get more specific into certain niche topics or categories within that. But like those two kind of always sort of leap to the forefront, I think. And there's a couple, a few in Swedish. I mean, not really Viking Age per se, but I have found Viking Tidens Vaga by Christina Geirsson to be a very, very good book.
Yeah.
And have looked back at that one a number of times.
Yeah. So do you have any like favorite Viking story, like the Icelandic saga or like mythology, like from the Edda, that you like to kind of?
A favorite one that immediately comes to mind and is mentioned in the Scandinavian Aggressors comes from Eyrbyggja saga.
Yeah.
And it's early on the settlement period of Iceland, and I forget the guy's name because I can never remember the names, but he gets to Iceland, and he sets up his home, and I think he cast his pillar into the water, if I remember right. I think he was one of the guys that did that, and he eventually builds a temple to Thor, and this is the special temple to Thor. You cannot desecrate it with human waste. If you have to relieve yourself, you have to go to that island over there, and eventually these two guys decide, no, we're not doing that. We're just gonna do our business where we need to do it, and it turns into a blood feud. And so,
as all the Icelandic sagas do.
Yeah. So, just the fact that they get into this sort of situation due to where they're allowed to
take a dump. Yeah. So I guess we got an answer to if the stories were vulgar.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting, but the Viking Age has become very popular. The past couple of decades, a lot thanks to like TV series like Vikings, of course, and a bunch of movies. But there obviously have been movies made about Vikings like over the years.
Yeah.
And I assume you watched a lot of them. So one of my favorite questions that we actually don't ask very often is, do you have a favorite Viking movie?
Yeah, I'd go with the 13th Warrior.
13th Warrior?
Yeah. I like the Northmen a lot. It was very good.
Mm-hmm.
But 13th Warrior has sort of a special place for me.
Okay. I like the book better than the movie, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the movie, they kind of lost me a little bit with leather pants, and they looked like rock stars almost.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't have everything.
They looked like they were Man-O-War out doing a movie.
Yeah.
Kind of. But I still think the basic story is actually very fascinating.
Yeah, it's a great story. Everything wasn't right or perfect in the movie. I mean, the fact that Antonio Banderas stands up all of a sudden speaking fluent Norse or English in the movie, but what they're, it's kind of like, okay, but it was sort of, I think in the book he had a translator the entire time or something like that.
Yeah.
But, so that there's certain things like that, but it's just a fun movie, and it was one that at the time was released, so like kind of made a maybe bigger impact on me. And just due to the timing on some level.
I kind of liked the movie though, but it that kind of threw me off a little bit.
Yeah.
But then again, I mean, a lot of Viking movies are not really historically accurate anyways. Like Vikings, for instance, obviously, like a lot of the clothes and everything are not, like, we don't know.
Yeah.
Actually, we don't really know that much. We only found fragments of clothes anyway, so we don't really know what Vikings wore. But would you say that historical accuracy is important for you when it comes to movies?
Up to a point. The more that I don't pick up on, I guess I appreciate as far as inaccuracies going, but I understand, certain creative liberties need to be taken.
Yeah.
So, maybe there's a fine line there somewhere, but I'm not somebody who's sitting there taking notes about everything they got wrong.
Writing to complain about it.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's entertainment.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to make a distinction. It's not a doctorate paper or anything.
Right.
Yeah. So it makes sense. Like let yourself be entertained by the story rather than getting hung up on details, I guess. And I think that's also why I enjoyed Vikings so much, because I think it's a really. Did you watch this show?
I did watch it. Yeah.
Did you enjoy it?
I had more mixed feelings on it. There's certain things about it I did very much enjoy. It. Other things I had a little harder time with.
Okay, such as?
I felt that it got maybe a little, I don't know, more like a soap opera in certain ways that is not my style, I suppose.
Okay.
But in the when they're always saying, "Oh, we're Vikings," we're
okay.
but I mean, it had a good production value and acting, and it made the whole thing a lot more popular, and so
I think for me, what made me, and I said this in previous podcasts as well, so I'm not going to linger on it too much, but I think what made it like really for me is that the fact that Vikings all of a sudden were portrayed as multifaceted people and not just like brute savages killing and raping and plundering and burning, but they actually had lives.
Yeah, it did do that well. Hey, I agree. And you feel like they're real people and not just caricatures of what we've been thinking they are for the last 100 years.
Exactly. Because to me, that's, again, going back to like when you read the Edda, that's how you understand, or even the Icelandic sagas. Like if you read that, that's how you understand that they are. Obviously with a slightly different moral compass than we have today, but still, people with emotions and everyday lives, and obviously most people were not Viking back in those days.
Right.
So that's also a factor in that.
No, it's a good point.
So why do you think that people are still talking about Vikings? Because, I mean, obviously it's a very short period of history. It's only like 300 years of history. Like, why did it make such an impact?
You mean for like today?
Today, or like in general? I mean, obviously the popularity has come back a couple of times.
Yeah, I think that probably, I'm thinking more about today, and in recent years anyway, that there probably has something to do with also the rise of modern day fantasy. And, this was all stuff very inspirational to Tolkien, and Lord of the Rings is still like the great granddaddy of modern fantasy books and movies. And so there's all that imagery that goes along with it that is pulling from Viking stuff and Beowulf and things like that, and that probably helps kind of perpetuate it some. And that's a genre that's very, very popular. And when you see that a lot of the kind of mainstays from that kind of have their roots in this, I think that it probably contributes something to it anyway. And then maybe beyond that, I think a little bit of that perception of the Viking being this, kind of independent person that just kind of doing their own thing, going out on their own. Like, we were saying, like, well, I mean, maybe that's not the quite accurate perception, but I think it is the perception that prevails. And so people sort of latch on to that. And, it's an understandable thing to, that's what you're seeing. It's appealing. So,
I think there's a phrase from the like 1800s, like 19th century, where they talk about the noble savage kind of idea of the Viking, which is basically like this, almost like this knight that's not Christian, but he's fearless and brave and magnificent warrior kind of type, and which ultimately actually kind of led into a part of history that we don't want to talk so much about. But would you say that the interest in Vikings today is growing even more now?
Oh, I think so. Or at least certainly in the last 10 years or so, really became noticeable
Yeah.
how much more there is about it. And I'm paying attention probably to books, fiction, maybe more than other things. And, when I first started writing the initial poor manuscript of that book and started my website, you walk into a bookstore and good luck finding a fiction book about Vikings.
Yeah.
Now, it's not such a challenge. And beyond that, there's everything that you can get that, bookstores aren't carrying because it's just not a big enough title to validate them putting it on their shelf. And the, social media thing in it has become big, which is not how I think it used to be. And I was latecomer to social media in a lot of ways, but I did have a MySpace account way back.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's ancient.
Yeah. It's talking about these prehistoric times.
Yeah.
But that was something that I was on there and just, seeing, occasionally chatting with other people. And there were occasionally people you came across that had this Viking interest, but it was kind of like sort of few and far between and compared to now. Like you go on to any of these, the social medias that are still used in regular existence or whatever. And it's like, there's a lot of people who are into it in one capacity or another, whether it's their musicians or writers or they're craftspeople or reenactors or whatever they are, and I don't remember seeing that back, when I was the couple of years that I messed around on MySpace.
Yeah. So what do you think attracts people with the Viking Age or the Vikings, apart from what we said, like the image, like,
Yeah.
Would you say that, well, actually, let's save that question because I wanted to ask something more specific. Why do you think Viking Age mythology is relevant today? Like, because obviously you have the books that you've written now, like the Impudent Edda. So are they relevant, and why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think that people like them for there's lessons in them. I think that Havamal and Poetic is probably the best example of that, where it's just kind of old lore about don't be a jerk, live an honorable life and just be decent to other people. Don't be a slob or take advantage of other people. Those kinds of lessons are sort of embedded in it. And, then there's sort of value of wisdom and sort of showing courage and things like that. I think those are things that people still kind of resonate with.
So would you say it's almost like a philosophical interest that people take in the old mythology today?
I would say I think that that's probably right, but it's like maybe more of a subconscious philosophical interest. I think those things are there, but I don't know that necessarily everybody realizes like that's why they're drawn to it. That's my, I suppose, prediction.
Because that's what it is for me.
Yeah,
I always like the especially Havamal.
Yeah.
From a philosophical standpoint. Because there's so many, as you said, so many good verses in there that you can relate to, even though they're like 1,000 years old.
Yeah.
So even like they're still valid today, as you say, like live life good, don't be a jerk,
yeah,
and don't be a slob.
Yeah.
Just behave.
Yeah, be a good person. There's hundreds of years worth of advice built into that, know. So
exactly.
It's got to be kind of hitting it on the right.
So what else do you think attracts people with the mythology?
I think it's just they're good stories too. They're good versus evil in the end, and monster slayings on the way to that end. And I think that's just a classic sort of narrative that will always draw people to it, you know, and there's, battles and excitement and, then the ultimate battle to end all battles.
Of course.
So,
yeah. Ragnarok.
Yes.
So being that there are, because I kind of wanted to circle back to what you said earlier.
Okay.
Being that there are such great stories in here and so much inspiration, because I know I draw a lot of inspiration for that myself in what I do. Why do you think that for such a long time you can find decent like books, like novels or fiction novels or about Vikings and the Viking Age? Because you said that earlier, it was hard, like going into a bookstore and to actually find like a fictional novel about Vikings.
So why is it easier now, or
So why do you think it's easier now? And like, why wasn't it before?
I'm not totally sure, but I think it has probably something to do with this whole increase in interest, and that so more people are probably writing about this material than there used to be, and due to increase in interest. But I think also there's been more of an acknowledgement from the maybe publishers' side of things that there is interest in this. I remember listening to a podcast, the Rocks, Paper, Swords, I think, is a small podcast of these two guys in England that talk about historic fiction, and they interviewed somebody who was like, my agent told me that nobody was interested in Vikings, and it was like a kind of a chicken and egg thing, or whatever that phrase is, where it's like, well, is there no interest in Vikings, or is there just no book, so there is no interest? Which is it? And it's sort of been shown since then, since that industry has maybe kind of broadened its horizons a little bit and started considering these sorts of novels, that they perhaps put them out there, and they'll show that they're purchasing them. It wasn't maybe so I think that maybe had something to do with it. I don't know what caused that to change necessarily exactly, but I think that probably had something to do with it. That it's a very rigid industry from what I understand. And like,
so have you read any fictional novels that you could recommend to any, that you found interesting?
Fiction, there's quite a few. I've been reading a lot of Viking related fiction of late. Of late being for a long time actually, but taking breaks. So there's a really good series I like by Angus Donald. That's a little bit pre-Viking actually, but it's about Fireborn. It's guy like The Last Berserker.
Oh, okay.
It's just action adventure. Tim Hodgkinson has a good series. Those are action adventure ones. I liked one by Stephen McKay, who's one of the hosts of the podcast I just talked about. And then there's actually a few guys who are also doing kind of humorous things as well. And the probably best known, they're most related to kind of like what I do, is there's a guy called Geirsson. I think he's also American, but he wrote a book called Sagas and Shit. And you can get it at the airport in Iceland if you're passing through. So that's funny. And then I have a couple buddies, Bjorn Larson and Greg Amato, both writing about Vikings, and their stuff's good too. So,
because I totally agree with you. When I grew up, there was basically only one fictional book that I know of. Anyways,
Frans G. Bengtsson.
Yes. What's the English translation? Is it The Long Ships?
Yeah, they call it The Long Ships. I know it's wrong.
Yeah. Well, I guess I for some reason I think if you direct translated it, it would be very, very odd name, Red Serpent or something.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't pull in as many people to pick it up and look at it. Red Worm, Red Serpent.
Exactly. But have you read it?
I have, yeah. I read it. I read it twice, and it was quite a while ago. The second time, the first time was a long time ago. I really liked it. I found it very interesting.
I also think that's a very humorous book.
Yeah.
And I think, for me, when I first picked it up, I couldn't put it down. I read it like back to back. Both,
Yeah.
like I had one of those books like where you have both parts because it's come two parts.
Yeah. That's how they've released it in the
Yeah.
States also.
Yeah, so I read it back to back. I thought it was amazing, so I can truly recommend it to anyone. Great book, written in 1951, actually.
So, yeah, it's a bit of a classic at this point. Like, these others I was mentioning, they're all like, in the last 5-10 years, something like that.
Yeah.
They're much more recent, but yeah, there's that standby that's great.
Are there? It seems to be a lot of like English and American authors who look into this part. Is there a reason for that? Do you think?
As opposed to more than like
more than Scandinavian authors.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I know there are a lot of Scandinavian people also writing about this, but it feels like there's a lot of English and American authors who are interested in this particular period of time for fictional novels. Would you say that I'm right or wrong?
No, I think you're right. I think it's there's definitely an upswing, and I don't really know why exactly. Beyond some of the other kind of things, well, it's gotten bigger, and there's the TV series and the movies and everything. People are into it more, but it certainly does seem to be a time period that's taken off. And American, I don't think has as much as England. At least the books that I'm aware of that are in the fiction world, there seems to be more coming from there than United States.
You might be right, yeah.
But there's still some coming from the United States too. But it really seems like if you are browsing online or something and you're looking for Viking fiction or whatever they want to label it as on a website, a lot are coming out of England.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, and as I said, I have some reading up to do because I kind of like the little stuff I found in these books. So again, The Impudent Edda and The Scandinavian Aggressors, if you want to check it out, and if you're from Boston, or if you know someone from Boston, Norse mythology for Bostonians. Yeah. Great books. Now, the Viking Age interest is one of your big things, obviously. So, if you were a fly on the wall back in the Viking Age, what would you like to see or experience?
So, I think the first thing comes to mind would be on the Vinland Voyage.
Vinland Voyage?
We were talking about that just as a recurring interest to me. I think it was Martin Erickson said something similar for an answer recently on
I think he did,
but just where did they go? Like, I'm not expecting them to have gotten to where now Boston is, but I would certainly have been interested to see where they got to, who they interacted with, like who angered who. Yeah. That would have been great. And if I could,
it must have been pretty rough though.
Yeah.
It's not a short journey in an open ship over the Arctic Ocean, basically.
Yeah, to an unknown place.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're going to find there.
Or how far you have to go before you find land, for instance.
Yeah, and what will the food situation be like?
Yeah, that's insane. Just water.
Yeah.
Like, we know, like, even, like, when they had bigger ships, water was a big problem for the long voyages. To have fresh water along. Yeah. That must have been very difficult.
Yeah, to not sink on the way.
It's insane. I agree. That's one of the things that you kind of would want to like see how they actually did that. Yeah.
So that's top for me. And if I were able to like scale it back a little bit further in time, I'd also just been fascinated to see the Royal Mounds in Uppsala being built. I know that was before, but I mean, just what exactly were they doing when they made these? So
massive. It's amazing. I was there not long ago. It's a fantastic place.
Yeah.
And Vendel, of course, could have been interesting.
Oh yeah.
Even though it's not really Viking Age, but
but still, it would have been of related interest. And what were they doing there? There's clearly some notable settlement with warriors, and they were really happy about themselves to give themselves these good burials.
Yeah. Insane. But all right, so the journey to Vinland, obviously interesting, but here's the $1 million question. Would you have liked to live back in the Viking Age?
No.
Why not?
Yeah, I like the modern day conveniences. I think that's being able to take a shower, have, health care, those sorts of things, and, not, have the risk of just suddenly one day you become a slave and, that sort of a thing.
True. True.
It's good to, but it would be fascinating, if you could time travel for a day or two and, as long as you could kind of stay, out of the way and like not piss somebody off.
And get your head chopped off.
Yeah, something like that. Like, that would be, certainly fascinating. But
wow, I think personally it would have been like for I don't think we can imagine like the mindset of the people back then and what life was back then. It would be really difficult to imagine.
Yeah.
So getting thrown into a like historical environment like that, even if you know all you know today, you would be like a fish on dry land almost.
Yeah.
Because you don't know the rules, you don't know anything.
Yeah, you'd make the wrong move and just like walking inside or something like that.
Exactly.
And be like,
you look at someone the wrong way.
yeah. Like all of a sudden it's like a fight.
Yeah, exactly. So I think for that reason itself, it would be terrifying if you did the time jump to that period of time. But then again, if you were born in that time, you wouldn't know anything else.
True.
So, but then again, then it's not you going back. Then you're someone else being born back then.
Yeah,
so,
I suppose if you wiped the slate clean and went there with no memory or anything, then it would be a different thing. But assuming you do have your memory.
Yeah. But I also think, I think to go in there, like, as a time traveler, as someone who comes into like that kind of society back then without any like social ties, because in Viking Age Scandinavia, that was everything. Like who you knew, who your friends were. Like you needed to cultivate friendships and stuff. And if you come into that kind of society and you have nobody, that's gonna be tough.
Yeah, that would be probably wouldn't be very, very happy at the end of the day.
I don't think so.
Cry yourself to sleep.
Yeah, in the ditch where you're sleeping because you can't sleep in a house.
Run away and hope you don't get caught or chased down or something, even if you're a free person.
Like for all the series that we've done now, I mean, we've been doing these for a year now, and we've asked this to almost everyone. I think we started on the second or third show. And there's only one person who said they wanted to live back then.
It's like unequivocally, like, yes.
Yeah. He had to think about it a little bit, but he was like, I think I quite would like that.
Even with all the memories of living.
Yeah. But then again, he's a very interesting guy. He like lives Viking style. He loves the whole, like, it's more of like a lifestyle to him than reenactment, if you know what I mean. So,
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, so he just really fully embodies it, I guess.
Pretty much.
Out, so.
Then again, I'm not sure he actually knows what he's getting himself into. But it's a lot of fun. Well, thank you so much for coming to our longhouse and having this chat with me. It was a pleasure having you. Looking forward to reading your books.
Oh, thank you.
And enjoy the rest of your stay here in Sweden. What do you like? Like, you staying a month? Do you have what are your plans?
Plans are I actually do some distance work while I'm here, but
you're writing on something new.
Well, there is a new writing project going on that I'm doing with my friend Matt. I haven't even mentioned Matt, but he did the cover of Impudent Edda. He's an artist, and we're gonna
this one.
Yeah, we're gonna we have a new book. It's going to be, he's illustrating, but it's going to have interior illustrations instead of just the cover. And It'll be in a similar mind space and spirit as The Impudent in terms of the type of humor.
Okay.
And hoping to have that.
Is it also based in mythology or history?
It's going to be history, but it's sort of like The Impudent, but history instead of mythology.
Oh,
and
okay.
we plan to launch it on Kickstarter later in the summer, so
All right.
that'll come out at that point. But so yeah, working on that a little bit. Little bit of I do design work for a living, so a little bit of
okay.
that, and
Yeah.
I'd be exploring the southeastern part of the country when the time is available. I would really like to visit Öland and
Yeah, of course.
see Ekatorps,
Yeah, like we mentioned.
Sandbyborg, a little before Viking time, but big massacre there, and that would be I think it looks out at the ocean from what I've seen. So yeah, happy times, happy times.
Well, thank you so much for coming. It was a pleasure talking to you, and good luck with the Kickstarter project and the new book. Yeah, looking forward to reading it.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Thanks so much for having me. Quite an honor, pleasure to be here.
All right.
So, yeah.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks, you. Yeah. Cheers. Skål.
Skål. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this episode, check out our other episodes on our YouTube channel, Spotify, and other podcast streaming services. And also, subscribe to support our work. Thanks for listening.